Welcome everyone to the next program in our career series here at Berkeley Law and the Berkeley Center for Law and Technology. Once again, Wilson has been kind enough to donate some more time to us to help explain about practices that you may think you know, and maybe you don't know, in helping you understand the differences between firms, client types, and the boundaries between one practice and the other. So one of the practices that at least looks a lot like the first year of law school, some of the courseworks, is the mergers and acquisition practice. So if you've gone through corporate law, it's not a complete mystery where you're going to get to in this type of practice, though the day-to-day work could be a mystery, and the day-to-day differences between tech clients, life sciences clients, and then Fortune 50, Fortune 10 type clients is a little bit of a mystery, but they're all really significant. So again, I want to thank Wilson for donating some time, and I want to introduce our two instructors for the day. We have Jackie Hamilton and Dennise Martinez. I'll let them do a little bit of introduction, but I think one thing that's interesting is, I believe you're both from different offices of Wilson. So I think that's an interesting piece on how an M&A practice works across geographies. So Jackie, you want to start with the introduction?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jackie Hamilton, and I am an M&A partner in our New York office. And I'll leave it at that because we're going to get into all sorts of what else I do. And I work with Dennise, who is not in the New York office. Oh, maybe she wishes she were. But
yeah, so I'm Dennise. I am an M&A associate in the San Francisco office. I've been with Wilson since I was a summer associate after, and then joined full time after I graduated from Berkeley Law. Happy to be here.
Well, again, thank you both for coming. And I guess I want to start with just the broadest initial question. You know, what does M&A look like as a legal practice in big law firms?
Yeah, I can take this, and then Dennise, if you want to fill in holes. So I try to explain this. I have two little kids, and sometimes I try to explain what I do. I don't know that they've fully gathered it, but my best explanation for this is we help companies buy and sell other companies, right? So they understand buying and selling things, or that a store does. We do the paperwork, and we run the process to help companies buy and sell other companies. Obviously, within that, there's various structures, and there's various pieces that are going to be necessary to complete deals, and we're going to get to all sorts of specialists and all the things that they do. But high level, that's what we do. These, maybe flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I think most people think about it as like a merger, right? You think like the word that comes to mind is a merger. But as Jackie said, there's so many different sort of ways to accomplish combining companies. So you can do like a stock purchase, an asset purchase, a joint venture, acqui-hires. So there's so many different ways to accomplish what the goal is. And most cases you have sort of a target company and the company doing the acquisition, but sometimes you have multiple companies involved, which is something I don't think I really appreciated when I first started. But in any event, as Jackie and I will get into, no matter which way you sort of want to structure the transaction, it involves a lot of time, resources, and the clients really look to us to sort of guide them on what I always call it like a journey. And especially when you're on the sell side, a lot of this is very new to them. It's foreign, exciting, but it can also be overwhelming. And so they really look to us to sort of like guide them on what I call a very, sometimes very long, but very successful and fulfilling journey.
So especially in the tech and life sciences space, I hear students that sometimes run together or maybe just can't quite understand the nuanced difference between how law firms advertise their M&A practice and their tech transaction practice. And in my mind, as a simple litigator, I see them as, I love you're just buying and selling companies on one side, and often you're buying that company because of their technology. In the tech transaction, you're not owning the company, but you're licensing in their technology. You're making a partner rather than buying up a new company. And at a high level, is that a fair distinction for the two practices?
Yeah, I actually think that's really good. I sort of said before this, I think of us as, you know, buying and selling companies, and I think a lot of tech transactions work involves IP, right? So we don't really, as the M&A folks, we don't necessarily deal with the IP. There's high level things that we touch, but they, you know, patents do something else, but the tech transactions folks will do the sort of what quote softer IP, the trademarks and the copyrights and the trade secrets. But on a day-to-day basis, they don't just do M&A. And so they do things like write those license agreements that are part of our diligence process when they go to buy a company. So I'd say your explanation is a very good one.
Well, I think it's really important for the tech world, because there's virtually no tech company out there that's built entirely on their own technology. They're either licensing it in or merging in another, or buying a company and bringing it in. And it is the grease that makes the entire tech and life sciences world work. So one way or the other, everything's got to move around.
Yeah, and they also do the sort of very early stage stuff, right? So if a company comes to us and there's a different group, which we'll talk about, that like helps form companies, but the tech transaction folks are the ones that are going to write the IP assignment, and they're going to make sure in the deal context that when we go to buy a company or sell a company, that all of those IP assignments are correctly, you know, signed up, right? That everyone that was an employee at the company, you know, correctly assigned their IP, so that the company does in fact own that IP.
So you end up policing everybody else's work when you're buying and selling, it seems. So
yeah, that it is a critical moment. Yes.
Well, I mean, that leads us to a nice discussion about what type of clients. I mean, broadly, I don't necessarily mean to limit it to tech and life sciences, but what kind of clients do M&A lawyers tend to work with?
Yeah, I can take this one. So Wilson Sonsini represents mostly technology and life sciences companies, but M&A can, you know, just across many industries, across different types of clients. I would say that personally, I've also done M&A deals that are not in the life sciences space or in the tech space. So during my time here, I've actually done a deal for a meat processing company. I've done a deal for a shoe retailer. I've done a deal for another law firm, and a mass communications media company as well. Again, very odd to do something like that within Wilson, but again, it shows you that M&A can really touch on a lot of different types of industries. A lot of it depends on where you're located, right? So I'm in San Francisco, most of our clients are tech, and just like the firm does mostly tech. But that varies widely depending on the type of firm you are, sort of like what their client base is like, and sort of what they've historically done. So a lot of it is just like that's sort of like where what the firm has like done historically in the past and where they sort of situated themselves in the market.
So that's the type of company, but what about the size of the company? Are these all giant companies that you deal with?
No, I've also done multi-billion-dollar deals. I've done a deal for $1 before. So it can vary widely. We represent also buy side and sell side. So on the buy side, you might represent a big public company that's doing a small acquisition of, you know, maybe like a $75 million company, or in my case, another $1 company, a company worth $1. It really depends. The nice thing about what I like about Wilson is I've gotten that experience of working again for multi-billion-dollar deals and also just like your little $1 deal. Jackie, what about you?
Yeah, no, I mean that's sort of exactly what I was thinking to say is we work with all sorts of clients, right? So yeah, so on one hand you have these incredibly sophisticated repeat players, and repeat players means, you know, venture capital firms who are rolling over private equity companies, and you're, you know, as Dennise mentioned, public companies who are like serial buy-side acquirers. And then on the other, you have small companies or mid-sized companies, but we'll just go all the way to small companies, whether or not they're getting purchased or they're actually doing a small acquisition because they want to get bigger in their market. And so they're going to take out somebody who's like 10%, you know, their size, something like that. And I would say, you know, one of the best parts of working at Wilson is that literally on any given day, I'll be working on like a $4 billion deal and then a $10 million deal. And they both they are very different, obviously, and they require totally different things. Sometimes that $10 million deal is frankly harder because there's not really a great playbook. Everyone in the $4 billion deal kind of knows what they're doing within, it's like a repeat playbook. And so I think there's a lot of rewarding aspects of doing some of the smaller deals, and certainly for the entrepreneur who started that company, and this is, their first exit, right? That's obviously really fun to see.
I think that is a great point, because I know myself when I started my practice, well, the bigger deals are the more prestigious deals, and that's where the best lawyers are. And as my practice developed through the years, I began to like the smaller litigations. I mean, again, patent litigation, there's no real small litigation, but I knew the impact I was having was tremendous. It kept the lights on for that company. So, when I went to bed at night, I was worrying about it. When I got up, I was worrying about it because it made a huge impact. So I try to encourage students to think about how important is the deal to the client rather than how big is the deal. And it's a great way to get up in the morning knowing that, if your glass is half full or half empty, if you get up in the morning thinking, well, if I don't win this case, all those people get fired. That causes this kind of hairstyle.
That's why I'm an M&A lawyer, because generally speaking, it's, there are situations where it's kind of like that, but generally people are winning and they're happy. And it's a good thing. So it doesn't feel quite as serious in that way. But I think your point about it being really rewarding and important is a good one. I think that's one thing we see, and we get a lot. I'll just touch very briefly on Wilson as a firm and sort of this space, because we do these different types of deals. We get to be in the boardroom very early. You get to run the deal maybe as a fourth or fifth year, obviously with appropriate oversight, versus if you're only doing 4 or 5 or $30 billion deals, obviously you're going to have a lot of senior people. I mean, the team is just going to be so much bigger. You're not going to be even, I'm a relatively early stage partner. I'm not going to be the person that's leading that board call necessarily, but I'm surely leading the transaction of a $10 million deal or $100 or $500 million deal, right? So there's sort of stepping stones, which I think that's not true in every M&A practice, but it certainly is true here, just how the nature of our clients and various, sizes and stages, which is a really, really fun way to kind of learn M&A and the various nuances of M&A.
It's a great way to build your client management skill set over time too. I mean, if you never get to work with a client, you really don't develop those skills, because clients get nervous. For a $10 million transaction, this may be the biggest deal that client's ever done. And so
almost certainly a $10 million deal is probably the biggest thing they've ever done, because it's probably their first exit. They've never dealt with their investors in this kind of way. Yeah, it's honestly some of the most difficult emotionally for clients, right? Because they don't know what's happening yet. So
that's the counselor part of our alleged titles.
It is the being available for phone calls and texts all the time part of the job.
With that in mind, you've got different client types in terms of how they're making money, different sizes. I guess maybe focusing in on what Wilson has a great reputation for, and that's tech and life sciences. It's two separate. It's not a single practice group. How do those particular types of clients change the M&A practice and change what you two do from day to day?
Dennise, you want to take this one first?
Yeah. So you look at one thing you look at is sort of the areas of risk, right? So as an M&A lawyer, you sort of work in teams. You can't do this without your team. And a lot of your tech deals, as we mentioned before, you involve your tech transactions group. And you look at the areas of risk, and for the most part, the $1 million question is do you have ownership rights over the IP? Is that an area of concern? If not, if that sort of falls apart, sort of the entire deal can fall apart, right? And so that's a significant area of concern. for the clients that we service, again, not something that necessarily would be an issue when I'm representing a meat processing company. On the life sciences side, you might structure things a little bit differently. Sometimes we see things structured where the merger consideration sort of hinges on that company sort of putting a drug on the market, or putting a certain tool on the market by X number of years. So the way you structure that consideration can look a little bit differently, which is important for a client to understand, which is not necessarily an issue if you're just buying a software company that you're going to put to use right away. So again, sort of the issues that you have to grapple with, the things that you have to raise, can look a little bit differently with the type of clients that we service. And again, we don't do this as an M&A attorney. I don't do this on my own. We do have a really good group of specialists that work with us on both sides, that can help us sort of navigate these issues. Definitely couldn't do it on my own, Jackie. I don't know about you, but I rely on them very heavily.
No, I think the one thing I'll just sort of jump on that is, I mean, I mentioned the tech transactions because I feel like we're like a walking advertisement, but one of the things that's so different is because I was not always at Wilson, and so I was in a general corporate practice that I did other things, but the M&A that I did, I still remember, you know, it was for a REIT public company, and sitting there like over the weekend, like looking at all the documents, all the contract review, and like, you know, you take it and you pass to the next person. So here, because of the nature of these deals, particularly tech deals, you know, I'm not, you know, Dennise and I are not going to do that contract diligence. We might do some certain things where we're looking at agreements, but largely the contract diligence, the true customer contract diligence, it's all about the licensing and what they said in their terms and conditions, right? And guess who's perfect for that? Our tech transactions team, that when they're not doing M&A, they are writing those agreements. They probably helped write those agreements, particularly on the sell side for that client, right? Best case scenario is like, oh yeah, of course we did it. We wrote from day one, we did all the IP assignments, we helped them with their terms and conditions. So they are doing that diligence, which is a great way, you know, just feedback into, it allows us to, on the M&A side, not have to do that and then focus more on some of the other more, you know, M&A focused activities. But yeah, definitely a team sport here.
So Jackie, you used a phrase that I think is probably worth exploring. You said general corporate and M&A or M&A. So I'd love to know what the difference is between general corporate work and M&A corporate work.
Yeah, I was wondering what phrase I used at first when you said that. I was like, oh, did I say something? Okay, so so I think it differs firm by firm. So our general corporate group, I think, is probably a little bit different than other firms, right? Because we focus so much on early stage financings, and there, you know, there's various groups of people that do that, but that's a lot of what we do. Whereas you take, you know, different firms that don't necessarily focus on the early stage and the life sciences and tech focus. So if you just setting like the Wilsons and similar firms aside, I think general corporate kind of encompasses everything, right? So I used to give this example, is that I was staffed on an M&A deal for a client that I'd done a few deals for, and the partner in charge of that client, now he wasn't even an M&A lawyer, but he was sort of overseeing this deal. He calls me and says, look, you know, in order to do this M&A deal, they're also going to need to do a derivatives offering, which is a very significant type of public company offering that I probably, you know, didn't really have any business doing. There were people who were much more, you know, expert. They're far better equipped to do that. So I helped on that. And I was sort of cross-staffed, right? Because I was doing the deal, so I could help them understand the nature of the deal for purposes of securities offering. So you've got, you know, public company, capital markets stuff, right? You've got your general day-to-day corporate, you've got M&A. So general corporate is just really broad and kind of means, frankly, whatever a client needs. Well, and I think that's probably true here too. You know, we have sort of like feed off groups, and so, oh, you need M&A help, go see M&A. But, you know, a client calls somebody in the general corporate group and says, hey, I need this. That general corporate person is going to help you know, feed them to the right people.
So does a typical young lawyer coming in start in the general corporate group and then feed off into these specialties, or do you just start as an M&A specialist from day one?
That's a great question. It's a mix. So I started off doing general corporate work. Obviously, it wasn't here, and I kind of fell into it. I think there are benefits to doing it both ways, right? So there's pros and cons. I think we love to hire people who want to do M&A as summer associates. They come in, they help, they work with us directly, and I'm gonna look at Dennise. Dennise, I think you are in the M&A group as a summer. So maybe you could speak to this.
Yeah, so I went in directly as a summer associate in M&A. And that's what we usually have done for the summer class. We try to get people who want to dedicate themselves to M&A. However, if you were in a general corporate summer associate and you had an interest, or you sort of expressed an interest on wanting to sort of do a little bit of M&A, we've welcomed that in the past. And another thing I would say is that even if you are in general corporate as a full associate, sometimes our general corporate associates do M&A. Maybe not to the scale that we do it, but they definitely do some transactions. So it's not, you won't necessarily will never touch one. That might still come across your desk, but yeah, that's the way we usually work at Wilson. Is that if you want to do M&A, we do want you to dedicate your entire summer to it if possible. But again, that door is not closed if you want to sort of keep your options open.
So Dennise, you came straight into the M&A group. How did you make that decision? Did you know all along? Stumble into it? How do you get there?
Yeah, so I personally was looking for something very fast-paced. I wanted something very fast-paced, very fun, exciting, and people kept saying you might want to look into M&A. They're like, that's known as like they're like the extra gunners. Those are people who are just, you are constantly on. It is very fast-paced, but it's very exciting. That's something that interests you. And I said, sure, let me try it. And when I interviewed as a summer associate, I interviewed with some of the partners in the group, and it felt like a right fit. So I did my summer associate summer here in San Francisco. I loved every minute of it. I thought the attorneys were brilliant. I thought the work was really interesting. I loved our clients. Our clients just seemed very engaged and very excited. And so I just really enjoyed the work. I couldn't wait to come back as a full-time associate, and I've been here many years since then. I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. And it's very interesting. Every day is different. Every year is different. The things that I come across are different. But the people are still very exciting, engaged, brilliant again. And the clients, again, always interesting clients that come into the door, and always interesting work.
So this is what I teased at the very beginning. The two of you are in different offices. And I think, especially in today's world where remote work is more of a reality, whether law firms like it or not, it is a reality. So how do you work together? How do you train new associates in this M&A practice?
Yeah, I mean, so this has sort of been my practice since I began as a lawyer, and I'm a little bit older than Dennise. But it just was the case that where I worked and the people I happened to be staffed on deals with, they were not always in my office. So some of the M&A, some of the corporate people might be, but you work with the tech transactions or IP folks, you work with the tax team, and just chances are that all of those specialists probably are not in one office. And even if they are, they're probably not on your floor, and so you're still gonna have to call them. And so it just became the practice that, phones, I mean, obviously email, right? But email, phones, now because of the, sort of larger take on remote work, like video calls are far more common. Frankly, I didn't really see my clients prior to the, to the pandemic and working from home. And now I see them almost every day. Like, it's weird if we don't get on a video call. I'd say IM capabilities have come a long ways. It's a great way. Like, if you're in the middle of a call, don't do it with if you're on a Zoom call, don't do it so that everyone can see it. Just but the firm internally has like an IM system, and just say, oh, hey, like the answer is X, or hey, like Dennise is like, hey, Jackie, you said you wanted to bring up this thing. Did you forget about it? Like, don't forget, make sure you bring up this thing. So I think there's a ton of cross collaboration, and so much of what you do can be done remotely. With that said, I'll sort of put a pitch. I'm in the New York office, and several of our associates in the New York office, and we have quite a few, come in, on a regular basis. They don't come in 5 days a week. I'm not there 5 days a week. Certainly no one wants to be. But I think coming in 1 or 2 days a week can be helpful at certain times in your career, particularly at the early stages where you're just getting to know people. So I'll use this example as you don't really feel comfortable sending a partner or somebody an IM because you've never met them, right? But once you've had a coffee and you're like, oh, I know their dog's name, then it's much easier to just say, hey, oh, something very short that you don't necessarily need to put in an email, and you want it, it's like a text message, right? But shows up on your computer.
And I would say one thing I don't think I appreciated when I was thinking about law firms and law firm life is that you have this idea of a lawyer being behind the desk, just drafting away, right? But it's actually much more dynamic than that. So I didn't appreciate how much I would be on the phone or just communicating with people all day long, which I think makes cross collaboration across offices, across time zones, not a big deal, just because you're just so used to either being on the phone, being on a Zoom call, chatting on Teams. So it's just the way of life and of an attorney. And that's something I don't think I appreciated when I was, again, in law school. I thought it was just behind the desk, drafting all day, reading, but it's definitely much more than that.
Well, and I love that perspective that remote work is the new term, but since law firms had really obtained file sharing capability, distributed work has been pretty common in big firms, just because talent is never in the same office, or rarely in the same office. And so we've been doing it, big firms have been doing it for a long time, some better than others, but it's not new. But it's funny you mentioned how many clients you used to see face to face,
yeah,
before,
because you weren't
Zoom.
doing it with clients, right? So you were doing it internally, but then clients, all it was, at least in my experience, particularly as an associate, was maybe a partner saw them once a year because they went to some sort of annual meeting or a dinner or something, or they flew there. But the associates weren't seeing them, and there was no real, we didn't have cameras in every office, and we, there was just no need for that, and no one had thought about it. But yeah, it makes things so much easier to get everyone involved and to make sure that you can kind of see who's paying attention and who's not on video calls. I don't mean that to be scary. That sounds sort of like a threat. It's not, right? But it does sort of force, it's a forcing function, frankly, even as a partner. It's you've got so much to do, but if you're on a video call, you can't sort of just let someone else do it. You've got to look like you're paying attention, because you need to be paying attention.
Well, I think the evidence of this comes in my world, in the litigator world, where litigators are probably the most obstinate group in terms of new technology and new techniques. Now they've all moved to video depositions. Hey, this is just as good as me flying across the country and sitting across the table from someone. I can see the same gestures. I can see the same, person that if they're fading because it's late in the day or they're being evasive. It's a good process. Not to bash litigators, but we're not known for being forward thinking on many of our processes. So it's a great way to think about it. I appreciate you bringing that up, that these kind of practices can be cross-staffed. And I guess one of the questions would be, is it common in Wilson for matters to be cross-staffed, or are you kind of a leader in that?
Oh no, it's I'd say every deal at this point. Even if maybe there's a rare deal where everyone is in the San Francisco office and including specialists, but that would be shocking, frankly, because I just don't think that we have all the specialists at all times at various levels in a single office. And so I think it's just, we don't think about it too much, as there are times when it becomes more important, where if everyone is so busy So in 2021, when people were just working all of the time and they were going to bed late and getting up early for calls, you don't really want to staff somebody on the West Coast also on like a UK deal, because then there's just like no time to sleep because of how the hours work. But generally speaking, I mean, we give some thought to time zones, right? Because they're, Delaware opens at a certain time, and that's obviously very important to us. And the New York Stock Exchange opens at a certain time. But other than that, I think we just kind of think of it as, at least I do, and I think this is true for most folks in the M&A group, is this is just the team. And, it doesn't really matter where they are, because they're not sitting next to you either way. Even if they were in the office, they're probably they're 100 feet away. So whether they're 100 feet or they're like on your video screen, I don't know that it really matters.
Well, wonderful. Well, just kind of the last question I will leave both of you. So you did a lot of research early on. You were looking for a particular lifestyle, a particular pace of work, and that took you to M&A. You kind of knew what to ask. For those students that don't know what to ask, or that are curious about this, what would you suggest they look at in law school? What kind of classes? What kind of questions should they be asking during networking events? How do you help them determine whether they're an M&A person or not?
Dennise, do you want to take that one first? You probably did that research.
I would say, if you're interested in M&A, or you want to, figure out if you are, if you should go for M&A, or if you're interested in it, speak to as many M&A lawyers as you can. So I did all the classes in law school. I took M&A classes, but really the where I got the most information on where I wanted to do M&A, because M&A can vary again across offices, across cities. Talk to as many M&A people as you can at different levels, right? And ask them sort of the questions that we've talked about here. What kind of clients do you have? Do you work across offices? How big is the M&A group at your office? And the more informed you become about what M&A practice looks like for those individuals at those specific law firms, the more you're able to determine not only whether M&A is something that you might be interested in, but whether you want to do M&A at that specific office in that specific group with those specific people. You'll be better prepared for interviews, and you'll just know. Sometimes you just won't really know until you actually start your summer associate program, but at least you'll be able to be a little bit more informed about the process going in.
Yeah, I'll just do a pitch here. So I had no idea that I wanted to do corporate law at all until I took corporations as a second year, and then it kind of clicked. I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I didn't really know that I wanted to do M&A until I kind of fell into it, right? So I was in this general corporate group. I started gravitating toward more M&A deals, and I could start to see where I liked all of the work I was doing. It was all interesting. Like when you're new, it's all just sort of like a free for all. You're like, I'm learning so much every day. But I was more excited to get staffed on M&A deals. I think this is not always the case, and certainly if you are not a thrill seeker, please don't take offense to this. But I think if you are somebody who really likes adrenaline seeking in various ways, right? Whether that's you like, I was really into aggressive inline skating as a kid, and so I was like going down half pipes, right? It's that kind of a rush of like, oh, I have to do this right now. This is urgent. Dennise and I were on a deal just before Christmas that like staying up all night. I mean, that's not super common, but it happens. Right. And I think there's a personality type that likes that. And I think M&A kind of provides a nice outlet for that. It doesn't have to be your personality just to succeed in M&A. There's plenty of people who don't have that, but that's one thing. If you haven't taken, it sounds like maybe a lot of people take corporations as a 1L. Wayne, I'm not sure at Berkeley, but it
may be an option more coming into it their second year, but they should have some exposure their second semester.
Okay, so I think taking corporations and taking other classes, you don't have to take every single class, right? They're not all you don't need to know absolutely everything. This is truly an apprenticeship job, even though I just said you don't have to come in every day. There really is this like level of learning from the people, and they're going to show you what you need to do. You can't learn it in law school. What you can do is sort of give yourself this baseline of, okay, I understand how corporate law works, which frankly is different than most other areas of law. And if you really are up for it, I think taking securities regulations is really useful. I know it's a very hard class in a lot of places. And if you don't want to be a securities lawyer, maybe it's not worth it, but you learn the rules. If you want to do public company M&A, understanding those rules is, you can learn them elsewhere, but learning them that semester in law school it's a really good use of time, in my opinion. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for sharing a little information. It's hard choices to make these days, and their students are being forced to make them earlier than ever. So this is really beneficial to have some on the ground knowledge of what this practice might look like. So I want to thank you both, and I know you have a lot of other things to do besides this, but it'll be greatly appreciated.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Happy to help. And obviously feel free, have students reach out. Happy to chat. All right.
Thank you.